Hello and welcome to everybody on the Sunset Safari. For those of you who are here this morning, you are probably not surprised to see a few of the Birmingham boys in your screen, and they've dotted out in shady patches all in front of us. There's one up ahead over there as well, and another two up over there along with these two. So all five of them are together. Great prospects for this evening, and really looking forward to the safari with all of you. My name is Scott. I'm teamed up with VM on camera, and we've also got Jerry on the back getting some wind in her hair instead of being in the final control room. Jamie has headed out with Tebs on the other vehicle, and they are also following up on reports of some unknown lion. We're not sure who they were or who they are, that was seen on the main access road into Djuma later around midday this morning. Now to Julie and Joanne, thank you very much for your updates this morning. These lions were on the other side of the Djuma waterhole compared to where they are now, and they've now moved in a southerly direction after having a drink between the drives. And we got the message that they were on the move, and we were actually taking down a tent on the quarantine clearings that we had erected to do some tests for the coming big cat week. And we saw the lioness that was with these lions this morning pacing in a westerly direction across the clearings. We ran to go and collect the girls, well not ran, we drove to go and collect the girls who were finishing up some work in the final control room, raced back hoping to find this lioness, but don't know where she's disappeared to. So we'll probably maybe spend some time this afternoon looking for her while we wait for these boys to wake up. Other good prospects are that a herd of buffalo was seen on Djuma today. Now, these 5 male lions really enjoy hunting buffalo, and they're incredibly good at it. So we could be fortunate enough to see one of the ultimate showdowns in the African wilderness, and that is lions hunting buffalo. Let's take a closer look. I'm just going to drive around a little bit and get you some better views. We've been waiting patiently in the shade for your arrival, but now that you're all on board, we can get you a little bit closer to the action. While we were sitting waiting, we've realized that there's a yellow-billed hornbill nesting in a tree nearby here, so we're also going to spend some time waiting for it to return. I think it's just the male that's currently feeding the female in what sounds to be some chicks that would have already hatched in a cavity in a tree nearby. So that's also some exciting prospects. I'll stop here for a moment and let VM show you these two. It's still difficult to say exactly who's who, but some of you may be getting to grips with the slight differences. The notches and scratches on their noses is one good way of telling who's who. There's only one of them that's clearly distinguishable from the others, and he's got big black rings around his eyes. Fairly full-bellied, but could do with another meal. Now, I mentioned earlier on that they were on the other side of the Djuma waterhole camera, the northern side of it this morning, sadly out of view. But then they crossed south, had a quick drink at the puddle, and then continued up towards quarantine, where they're currently lying now. And they're almost positioned directly behind the tree that the camera is bolted onto. So the zoomies are not going to be able to see it. And Debs in Ohio was asking whether or not, so I'm just going to swivel around so VM can show you where this tree is. There it is. So Debs in Ohio was asking if it is close to the Djuma Dam cam. It certainly is, just on the wrong side of it. So as you can see from our position, the camera can't see us, and we can't see the camera. And then the little waterhole where they had a drink is just up over there, roughly, just to get everyone's bearings in check. There we go. There you can see the waterhole. And this is a shady spot where they've come for a snooze. So the other three are just lying up here. It's a very hot afternoon, about 29 degrees Celsius, 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and not expecting too much movement from them, unless of course some potential prey come into the area, which certainly is possible. Well, while I reposition, I'm just going to remind you quickly about a change in safari times. Starting tomorrow, we're going to be heading out half an hour earlier in the morning, and we are going to be cancelling the afternoon drive entirely. Only kidding, we will not be cancelling the afternoon drive. It's not changing times at all. So the afternoons are going to stay exactly as they are, and the mornings will be starting just 30 minutes earlier. And it's going to make a big difference to the experience for all of us, getting out that little half an hour earlier. The light does afford us to do that. It's already light at 5 o'clock, so just it's about time we've changed. So really looking forward to that, to maximize and get in sync with the animals. Oh, this is incredible. This lion has not even flinched. Right in front of us, it's probably only about 8 or 9 meters in front of us, and it literally has not even moved a muscle. And that goes to show what a good relationship is had between animals and humans out here. One that causes very little impact on the animals' lives, and because they know we're not going to harm them, we're not going to provide them with meals, and they thankfully don't see us as a prey source, even though we could be, we are allowed to spectate and understand their lives without interfering at all. And hard to see how big they are while they're lying down like this, but their manes aren't fully developed yet. And Sean is asking, how old do we think these lions are? It's a good question, Sean, and hopefully if you keep tuned in, you'll be able to see them with their heads up and get an idea of what about a 5-year-old lion will look like. They're all in and around the 5-year mark. One is slightly older, 3 are about the same age in all likelihood, brothers, and 1 is slightly smaller, possibly a cousin. So you'll find that they were in all likelihood born to the same natal pride. Maybe 3 different lioness gave birth over a similar period, and these 5 grew up together and are now busy establishing this territory as their own. So they're not quite, they're getting into their prime. They've come and chased 2 big males away, but aren't there just yet in terms of body size. A lion that's about 7 years old will be in its prime. And Sean, let us know where you're from, and anyone else who wants to send through questions, just let us know if you can where you're from. It's wonderful to know where all the different people are watching from in the world. And if anything interesting is happening in your hometown, please let us know. Look at this one lying on its back. Absolutely wonderful. Well, that's one seriously comfortable lion, if I've ever seen one. Interestingly enough, I've even seen them roaring whilst lying on their back, upside down like that, with a belly full of buffalo. Well, good afternoon to Laurie, and good to have you on board with us. You're all the way in Finley, I believe. And for those of you who are new to the show, it's important to understand that we also do a few broadcasts live to television, and we do them sporadically. The next ones will be during the Big Cat Week on Nat.Geo Wild channel in America, and that will be starting on the 28th of November and running until the 4th of November. So we'll be doing a total of 24 hours of live TV, and we're all looking forward to it. So spread the word. As I've said before, and I'll keep saying again, the more people that we get on board this safari experience, the more places we'll be able to take you, and the more experiences we'll be able to share. Quite a strong wind blowing this afternoon. Again, great prospects for hunting this evening. Lions prefer to hunt in windy weather because it makes their approach and their stalk difficult for their prey to hear. Their prey will naturally be a little bit more nervous than normal, but it's favorable hunting conditions, no doubt. For now though, as you can all see, it doesn't look like they're going to be doing anything anytime shortly, and I'm guessing, you're all welcome to also have a guess as to when they're going to get up. I'm guessing the earliest we're going to be seeing signs of life is around 6 or 6:30 more likely. So we've got a bit of a wait ahead of us, but we are going to probably go off and do some other things while we wait for them to recover from this little coma that they're currently in. One of those things that I would like to do is go and position ourselves near the hornbill's nest, and I think it could well be a nest used by hornbills that we were aware of last year. They've got a really clever way of nesting. They find cavities in trees and then close them up with little bits of mud and excrement, so it just leaves a tiny little coin slot within which the female will be enclosed with the chicks, and the male will bring her all the food. But I'll tell you a bit more about it when we hopefully see this nest. And apologies for joking about with you all a bit earlier, saying that the afternoon safari will be cancelled. Deborah said her heart skipped a few beats, but we would never do that, and we would like to spend as much time out with you guys as possible, so fear not. We're gonna stand by near these 3 knobthorn trees in front of us. The hornbill's nesting somewhere in here. I'm not too sure exactly where, although I think I can actually. I've seen the little slot now, so I'm just going to show you the little slot quickly, and then we'll probably send you across to Jamie. Vim's already onto it with his hawk eyes. So there, just at the top of the picture, you'll see a very thin slit in the tree, and that slit has been built up with, like I say, mud and excrement, and there's a hornbill, in all likelihood just the female inside there. We were on the other side of the tree when we saw the male come back and deposit a large caterpillar in there, and there was a large squawking of excitement, and we're going to wait here for him to return. And while we're waiting here, why don't you guys head off to Jamie and give her a hand with her search for this unknown pride of lions.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and as always, welcome to the Sunset Safari. And sitting pretty much 2 kilometers from their enemies, the Birmingham boys. Maybe enemies is a bad way to put it. but we do have the Tsalala pride, and unfortunately things are not looking positive for that one young male. We're definitely missing one lion. In terms of who we've got here, we've got the two young males, one on the right and one in the middle, the female without the tail at the back, and then the young female on the far left. And I've done a scouring of the area. I've checked everywhere, and I don't see any sign of the other male. And I've been also checking the backs of these lions, just to see if we can see that injury that was mentioned. There's the puncture wound that's still on the back of that one male, but that's an old injury. We've seen that before, and it's not looking too serious. It looks like it's healing up nicely. And they're very peacefully situated in the shade, as I said, right up close to Gari Gate on Boyatella main access, probably about maybe 2 kilometers, maybe less, from where Scott is positioned at the moment. And of course, with a big herd of buffalo, I'm sure Scott has mentioned, or the possibility of a large herd of buffalo as well. And I certainly hope that these lions are aware of the Birmingham Boys' presence. I know I mentioned before hearing that they'd come into conflict, that I thought that they would be well aware of the Birmingham's presence and staying away from them, but obviously that's not quite how it happened, because they clearly did encounter them. There is no actual proof that it was the Birmingham Boys responsible for it, but there were tracks everywhere, and I think it's the most likely suggestion, and the Birminghams are the most likely suspects, especially given their history in terms of terrorizing the prides around here. Nice to see that they are, at least the 4 of them are safe and sound. It's just a pity that we're in that situation where I think at this point it's likely that that young male has been killed, and he is probably somewhere still on Arathusa. If he hasn't been killed and he has been separated, it's a possibility, and it's something that, look, I was wrong about the sub-adult Nkuhuma lioness, the one remaining one. I thought that she had been killed and she was actually fine. She hung out with Junior for a while and hooked up with one of the older females and eventually ended up rejoining her pride. So it's a possibility, it's unconfirmed. But I would say, given the fact that these are young sub-adult males, they were in the region with the Birmingham Boys, and that the Birmingham Boys were so incredibly vocal that morning, I think it is a possibility that that male has been killed. In fact, I think it's more than likely. A very sad situation if we look back to when we first saw this group. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to try and loop us around. Unfortunately, we will be in the sun a little bit, but I want to try and get a nice view of their faces so that we can have a look at them. Are absolutely fast asleep at the moment, and Michael's daughter Audrey, now Audrey is 3 years old. Audrey, you want to know what I think lions dream about when they're asleep, and I'm going to actually reposition so we can have a look at their faces while we talk about this, because they definitely do dream, Audrey. They dream just like you and I would. Hello guys. And if we can have a look at the male lying in the middle there for Audrey, he is absolutely fast asleep. Audrey, I think lions dream about chasing animals, and maybe sometimes they dream about playing with each other. You can see the ear twitching against the fly. That is what I think lions dream about. I think they dream about the experiences that they have. But maybe, who knows, Audrey, Maybe they watch birds flying and dream about flying just like we do. Maybe they dream about being able to climb trees. I'm not sure what's happening in their heads, but that's what I think. They're looking very contented either way. I don't know. Audrey, what do you think lions dream about? I'm going to put the question out to the audience as well. What do you all think that lions are dreaming about on these hot, hot days where they sit and sleep in the sun for hours at a time? What's going on in their brains? And if you are new to Safari Live and you want to know how to send those answers through to us, or any questions that you might have, you can do it on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarth.tv. Now, at the moment, these lions are, these males at least, are fairly tiny. Ooh, rolling over. But I know that we have a question from Sandy in Indiana. So Sandy, you wanted to know how big is a lion's front paw, and I'm assuming we're talking male lion here. Let's ignore these little guys for a while because they're still pipsqueaks. If we look at the size, we went out earlier and we had a look at those Birmingham boys, and in particular the feet of the oldest male, Blondie. And I would estimate that even with both hands together, I probably would struggle to circle his paw. It's probably somewhere in that kind of region of size. Absolutely enormous and incredibly powerful forearms, thick forearms for using those big paws as weapons. Females are slightly smaller, so fly to the mouth. That was an unnecessary part of my afternoon meal that I really did not need, but it's okay, it's extra protein. If we look at the male lion's paw, if his feet are about this big, females is probably about this big. So quite a considerable size distance. Oh look, the fly survived. Flying, I'm going to send it on its way now, excuse me. Much as I enjoyed eating you. So yes, Sandy, really large feet. You can have a look at these young boys. They're a little bit smaller. We've got this one boy cuddling mom. And there's that enormous front left foot. And even for at this age, they're quite big. What I'll do for you, Sandy, if you keep watching, at some point when we shift around and we leave these lions, we will look for their tracks, and I'll give you a bit of a demonstration on the track itself. Now one of them, and I'm not sure which one of them, is snoring. I can hear snoring. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pick it up over the wind, but I'm just going to sit quietly for the moment. Unfortunately, I think it's a little bit too windy and a little bit too faint a sound. It's like the purring that we hear from them sometimes, but just a little bit softer. One of them, I'm not sure who the culprit is definitely having a snore. And I know that many of you are responding already to our question about what do lions dream about whilst lying snoring away during the afternoon. And Alex and Kathleen and many others are suggesting that lions dream about their next meal, and I'm fairly certain that is the case. I think they dream about catching their next meal as well. Would be interesting to know though. I wonder if they ever have nightmares. Mercedes is heard or read about the fact that lions, if we look throughout Africa, are listed as vulnerable. You're wondering if by 2020 there's a chance that we could lose them as a species. It's a very sad fact that whilst we're within South Africa, we have a lot of lions. We have plenty of lions, and they've been very well protected and for the most part very well managed in terms of their genetics and breeding. But further north into Africa, and I'm talking sort of around Central Africa, those areas, even within Mozambique and around that side, they have been very, now there's a fly up my nose, they're just targeting face at the moment, going for the moisture. There has been an incredible decline in lion numbers, and unless that situation is remedied, we could see a serious threat to the population. Now it's something that I think sometimes happens within the sort of general attitude of South Africans. I'm not saying it's something shared by conservationists, but as a country, I've often spoken to people who've suggested that it doesn't really matter if the lions are killed further north. Not doesn't matter, but at least we're protecting our own. But it's really important to remember that poaching is a Africa-wide problem, and that once lions are depleted in one country, they're going to come for them here, in exactly the same way as what has happened with other animal species that we do have in this area. It's a difficult one. I don't think we need to be too distressed about it. I think that South African lions at least are going to be well protected, and a lot of the African countries are slowly coming out of the situation of turmoil that they were in at the time. And I know that I spoke a little bit about the civil war in Mozambique and the effect that it had on the elephants, and it did have an effect on the lions as well, and that was part of what I was learning about in terms of the recovery of Gorongosa and the reintroduction of lions in that area. So there's a lot of stories of hope. There are animals that are used in different traditional medicine treatments, obviously without any cause. There's a lot of superstition attached to them. Although it has been fairly tricky the way that these lions are positioned at the moment. Now, when I first saw these lions, and for the times that they were seen afterwards, there was one young male with a very serious injury. I'm not talking about the puncture wound that the male that we're looking at currently has. There was a male with quite a deep injury to his back, I think it was his back left hip, around his rump. Deep gash that we suspected had been caused by an encounter with the Matimba males. Mary, I'm not sure if that's the one that's missing. I can't tell, because the one male has made it fairly difficult. At least we know that we've got both females. We've got the young female here, and of course that one without the tail is instantly recognizable. But I'm going to have to wait until these lions shift around, and I think that's going to happen fairly soon, because if we have a look at the male at the back, with his chin up in the air, he's in full sunlight. Now he's the one that I can't determine if he has an injury or not because of the way that he's lying. But if he does get up and move into the shade soon, then we should be able to see if he's got that injury. My suspicion, Mary, you can see already his breath is quickening. He's hot. He's too warm. He's going to want to move very soon. My suspicion, though, for Mary and the other viewers, is that it is that lion with that injury. He automatically jumps to the top of the vulnerable list because of being slowed down ever so slightly. We'll just have to wait and see. Wait for that particular lion to move. I do feel for these young boys. It's not a nice age to have been caught right in the middle of two pride takeovers, essentially. They were evicted by the Matimbas and ran straight into the Birminghams. And talking about prides that have fallen victim to those Birmingham boys, Sandra, who's watching us all the way from Iowa. Sandra, you were wondering if we have any update on the injured Djuma lioness. Last time I saw them, they were all looking absolutely fine. The one lioness had a bit of a limp, but nothing too serious. It is phenomenal. That was about a week ago, by the way, Sandra, in case you weren't watching that particular update. But it's been absolutely interesting to see how resilient the animals are. They really are quite phenomenal creatures. You know, some of the injuries that we see, we actually think that this animal's going to die, and then all of a sudden they seem to have healed incredibly quickly. They're resilient against infection, and they are capable of hunting and running as fast as they are, or almost as fast as they are on 4 legs as they can with 3. It's interesting to see. Oh, the sun is very bright this afternoon. It's just giving it, tucking themselves in. I'm hoping they're going to move fairly soon, and we can have an opportunity to get to see if there's any kind of injury on the back hip. Oh, here we go. Female's going to lift herself up. Yep, definitely the Tsalala lioness. No mistaking that girl. I think it was getting a little bit hot for her too, being cuddled by the young male, making her a little bit uncomfortable. It's something I still can't get used to, seeing a lion without a tail. She's beautiful. I mean, look at her. It's just that sudden surprise. It takes a while to get used to. And if we go across in a journey, there's a male that I think might be the injured one, but I don't know until he rolls over. This one is looking absolutely fine, apart from a bit of a puncture wound. They all look a bit hungry to me. I think they could do with a solid meal. They've probably been running scared for a few days since that buffalo and not stopping to hunt or kill. Even that female's looking a bit like she could use a meal. We'll wait and see what happens with those buffalo. I really hope, though, that they don't throw caution to the wind in interests of feeding and forget to look out for the Birmingham boys. I think, though, that is not a mistake that they're going to make anytime soon. We'll keep our fingers crossed, and of course both Scott and myself will be dividing our attention between the two prides so that we can spend as much time as possible with them. I'm going to suggest or put it to you guys that when we're done here with them, that perhaps we leave them and go and search for other things and then return back this afternoon as it starts to get a little bit cooler and a little bit darker. But we'll stay with them for a little bit longer. I want to see if that male moves, and maybe he can tell us whether or not he is the injured male. Maybe we can see, he's not going to tell us, but maybe we can see whether or not he is the injured male. Interesting. Take lots of screenshots if you can, especially of whisker spot patterns. We really are building up a database of different looking lions. As I said, they ran from the Matimbas straight into the clutches, as it were, of the Birmingham boys. And Sarah, you've asked a very interesting question. Sarah is watching us from Ohio. You want to know if they were attacked by the Birmingham boys. Feet in the air. Oh, shame. She looks unimpressed with the fact that her sleep was just disrupted. So Sarah, you were wondering if the Birmingham boys have attacked them, which I think it's safe to say they have, why would they stick around this area? Why wouldn't, since they fled from the Matimbas, why would they not have left? And the answer, I think, is because they're between a rock and a hard place. It's not that easy to find a safe place to run away to. And for the most part, lions like to move in familiar areas where they know where the game trails are, they know where the water is, they know where the animals might be. It's just that little bit easier for them. Now they could run off to the west and run into a different group of male lions. They could run to the east and run into others. There's not much in the way of unoccupied territory here. They could try and escape to the north and into Manyuleti, only to encounter the Salati males, or indeed the other half of the Matimba coalition up to the north there. I think it's just because they're trying to find a way to just find a safe place that is still a little bit familiar to them. And for the females, bear in mind that the females will have left that area, the subadult males in this case, and I'm sure that they will be hoping to return back to their natal range, so where they were born, once those subadults have reached maturity, because that is the way that lionesses operate. For generations they guard one area and one family line. We seem to be having an afternoon of carpets of cats. Let's head across to Scott with his Birmingham boys, and I will be back with you and my Tsalalas in just a few moments.
So, interesting stuff with Jamie and the Tsalala Pride. It'll be interesting to see where they head this evening. Tricky situation they're in. I'm not envious of any of the members of that pride. Absolute turmoil in their lives. Anyway, there's a happier story that's unfolding just in this tree up to the left of us here. So we're going to show you exactly what's going on. For those of you who may have just joined the safari, there's a hornbill's nest up in a small cavity of the tree here. And as VM zooms in, you'll notice a very small slit within that cavity. And inside there is, I'm almost certain, one female hornbill and either eggs or small chicks that would have already hatched. Hard to tell because we can't see inside there, but there was quite a commotion when the male has returned to feed the mother or those chicks inside there. And it's only happened twice in the 40 minutes that we've been here, so he's not having the most successful afternoon hunting, and I'm hoping it won't be too long before he returns. The last time he came back, he was just too quick for us to get you onto the vehicle, and you were busy discussing the interesting ongoings with the Tsalala Pride and Jamie. We are also with some lion, for those of you who have just joined, and they're just over my right shoulder here. Two males are in this patch of shade. They're the Birmingham coalition. Fast asleep. And very peaceful for now. I'm hoping their mood and temperament will change as the evening cools down. Like I said earlier, certainly good prospects for hunting. It's a windy afternoon and the wind's currently blowing away from us, but even if it was blowing towards us, Chris, in Arizona, we wouldn't really be able to smell the lions. They don't have a very distinctive smell, at least to my nostrils they don't. and it's uncommon that you drive along and then stop and be able to smell lions. Their dung is different. Their dung is incredibly smelly, so you'd be able to smell that. But lions themselves have got obviously a very faint scent that I'm not used to, or I don't have the ability to pick up, and I don't know any guides that can actually smell lions. So they're not too smelly, unlike wild dog, who smell like kind of wet blankets with a coating of Parmesan cheese, possibly. Not the best smell, the wild dogs. But other than that, most of the animals aren't too smelly, unless of course it's an elephant bull in must. That's a very distinctive, sweet, pungent smell that you could pick up on. Other than that, I'm trying to think of any other high profile animals that may be smelly, but can't think of any for now. Now, I don't want to reposition, but I do want to show you where these other lions are. I want to stay in this spot in the hope that we could show you this hornbill returning with some prey to feed his family. But we can show you where the other lions are. So it's a coalition of 5 males of all very similar ages, around 5. And there you can see 2. And then just off to their left, there's the 5th and final member. And not uncommon for them to kind of split up a little bit as they snooze during the day, but sometimes they can be literally carpeted one on top of the other. Cape turtle doves are calling furiously behind us. And also a few beautiful clouds out to the south, some cirrus clouds. Now, we've just got a question through. I think it's from Mischian. And with all of the action unfolding with the different prides of lions, we are actually not entirely sure what's happening, as are a lot of you not entirely sure. So we've been asked to kind of give an overview of what's going on, and we can start with these 5 males here. They've come into this area after having left the area. They were here this time last year, but then they were young, flying below the radar, not really interested in acquiring a territory. Over the winter months we didn't see them, probably for 7 or 8 months. They went far north, about 20 miles away from us, into the Manyeleti Reserve, before returning a few months ago. Now when they returned with a very different mentality to when they left, and they came in and chased the 2 dominant males, the Matimba males, south, still in the Sabi Sands, but they've moved quite far south and they've established themselves there. In establishing themselves there, they've chased the Tsalala pride and split it up into the northern parts of the Sabi Sands where we are now. So those lions you were viewing just now with Jamie are a result of these lions arriving here, chasing other males further south, and it's kind of gone full circle and they've ended up here where the dominant males that chased them away used to be. So I'm not sure if this is still making sense, but it should be. And it's probable that this pride of lions, the Tsalala pride, which is supposed to have 3 lionesses and 3 young males, which now has a male missing, it sounds like, that missing male could have been killed by these males, and the other 2 in all likelihood are going to see the same fate. No guarantees yet, there's no carcass that's been found, but there is speculation that he is already dead. Let's hope that's not the case. There's also the Styx pride, 3 groups of 2, they also split up, one of which could have been the lioness that was with these lions this morning. The Inkuhuma pride, still 6 members strong, again moving in this general area, but also doing kind of strange movements where they'll all of a sudden go much further away than they usually would before returning. I haven't seen them for quite some time now, all 6 of them together. So a lot of unknown. Who else is there? So we've mentioned the Tsalalas, the Inkuhumas, those are the 2 kind of bigger prides. Then there's the Styx lioness that are all kind of fragmented into 3 groups of 2, or at least that's the last we saw of them. The Birmingham coalition of 5, and that's about all for now. But what we could expect to see is a return of bigger dominant male lions, possibly the Majinga lions, possibly the Matimbas, or who knows, maybe the Salati males from the north in the Manyeleti, as well as another kind of satellite pride called the Shimungwe pride, which has also fled from the south and western sections of the Sabi Sands into this area. So a lot of turmoil throughout the Sabi Sands with regards to the lions, and we're doing our best to keep our finger on the pulse. The tricky thing is, even though with so many people driving around here on a daily basis, a lot goes on when we are not out, and therefore big chunks of the story are missing or unknown, and it's just possible theories that people put forward. So there's always going to be unknown, but we're certainly going to do our best to keep our finger on the pulse. Well, I hope this hornbill hasn't been eaten by something, because he's been gone for quite some time now. 2 caterpillars in 45 minutes is not the most successful afternoon hunting, and we certainly wouldn't have missed him returning. Big bird. And something interesting that happens with these hornbills, we're going to have to return to this hole another day, because I'd like to go out and search for this herd of buffalo and try and work out where they are. And thanks to Lynn for reminding me of this interesting fact. The female hornbill who's encased within that cavity will do a full feather molt while she's in there during the incubation and the initial raising of the fledged chicks, and then she'll be able to break out with her brand new feathers after a full makeover, and then be able to aid. Oh, isn't this cute? Not normal to consider cuteness with large male lions, but it does happen from time to time. Incredibly affectionate. As I was saying, the female will then break out and help the male to gather enough food to raise the chicks with their growing appetites. And that all happens in just over a month. Incubation to fledging will be just over a month in total. Okay, lions, we're going to go and look for your dinner. Sadly, we will not be able to bring you any takeaway, but we will come back and at least have some information as to what's going on with the herd of buffalo. They were seen about 3/4 of a mile away from here, not far at all, in a westerly direction, straight in the direction we're going to be heading in. And the little waterhole where these lions drank earlier is the closest source of water to where those buffalo were. And buffalo like to drink twice a day if they can, so who knows? Maybe they will be approaching here for an evening sundowner. Afternoon to, I think it's Ernie and Vernie. Sorry, not Ernie, Vernie. You were with us on the sunrise safari, so you're getting a lot of safari action today, which is great. And Vernie's wondering if it's safe to say that this Birmingham coalition of lions have established this as a territory. And for now, yes, Vernie, 100%, I think they have become rightful owners of Djuma and surrounding areas, with surprisingly little resistance from the Matimba males. So we'll see how long it lasts. There could well be another coalition that comes in from the north or from the Kruger that we maybe never even heard of, to ruffle their feathers, or even maybe the Majingalan coalition, which is an older coalition but still quite large in number. I think there's still about 4 or 5 of them. So anything is possible, but for now they are the rightful owners, of this territory, and there's been very little resistance to them coming here, or at least that we've seen. I think it's just some elephant dung, but I'm just going to go back and check, because it could be a predator lying down. Just through to our right, that's a pile of elephant dung just on the other side of the road, and I thought it could have been the body of a lion sleeping in the shade. So that's what got me excited. I think it's elephant dung, or is it a small termite mound? It's a small termite mound. So 2 errors there. And Sean, thanks for letting us know where you're from in Secunda. And Sean's managed to slip in another question whilst letting us know where he's from. And he'd like to know, how big is the average territory size for lions? Well, for a coalition of 5 big males like the Birmingham boys, it could be as big as 15 square kilometers, maybe even bigger than that. A lot does depend on the area. But in the Sabi Sands, where we are now, I'll say a good-sized male lion territory would be 15 to 20, or let me do it in miles rather, which is generally a bit better known. About 10 square miles, maybe 10 to 15 square miles would be your average territory for males, and females about a quarter the size of that, to about a half the size of that. But again, it's always going to be a shifting flux. It's never going to be a concrete set territory, and there's always going to be overlap of territories. Lions and leopards will defend the core of their territory quite ferociously, but anything outside of that core, and the core could be very small, maybe a square kilometer or a square mile or 2, anything outside of that would generally not be fought over too ferociously. Otherwise, lions would simply be fighting with one another permanently. And what's also important to remember is that it will always shift and be moving. But large areas, and that's why the bottom line is the reason why we can't see lions as often as we'd like to, is simply because they're not on the property. Djuma is a very small portion of the Sabi Sands, and they're often not around here. Look at this beautiful big Inyala bull. Oh, he got a little bit of a fright there. I'm not sure what that was that spooked him, but in this windy weather they will be a little bit more cautious than normal. You can see the little ivory tips on the top of his horns, indicative of a big male. The younger males will lack those ivory tips. Now, interestingly, Inyala are usually browsers that feed on leaves, but at this time of the year, especially because there's a bit of a drought going on, they will be a bit more versatile. He could still be feeding on leaves and small little saplings that are this year's produce, freshly germinated. Well, he could even be feeding on a little bit of the fresh green grass. And don't be surprised by the general green coloration that you see around us. It is abnormally dry, and we are experiencing a drought, although it's not too severe just yet. And to put things in perspective, when I arrived this time last year, the Djuma dam or waterhole was full. There were even hippos living in it. Now it is bone dry. So that gives you a good idea of how different it is to normal. And one thing it does mean is it's going to make for some interesting game viewing. It's going to be a predator-friendly year with lots of weakening herbivores, and that doesn't happen very often. It's a time for the predators to cash in and make the most of a bounty, which will not always be the case. We're going to send you back to Jamie as we continue in search of any buffalo, and we'll keep you updated if we do find anything along the way.
Now, I did reposition just so that we could have a look at the one who was lying down. And I think it was Mary who asked about it, and I'm sure many of the other viewers were wondering. The missing male is definitely the one with the injury across his back left hip that we've been seeing over the last few days. So he is the one that has disappeared from this group and probably most likely been killed by the Birmingham boys. It's a really sad situation. I was really rooting for that particular male, but unfortunately I think that he has been the one caught and taken victim. They're all looking a little bit the worse for the wear. Their hip bones are starting to stick out. They've all got injuries along their backs and legs, and they're looking very hungry. And obviously that comes from a combination of stress and the fact that they won't have had time to hunt. Shame. I was holding thumbs for these young males. I was hoping that they were all going to come out of this fairly unscathed, but that doesn't seem to have been the case. We never know though. Maybe he's out there somewhere. Females are looking okay. We just have a look at our tailless lioness. She's got a piece missing out of her leg. Not too deep, it's not a deep injury. In fact, oh, come on girl, that wasn't very nice. I'm talking about the outside of her back left leg. There's a little bit of a raw patch and a place where some fur has been scraped away. I'm not sure if that's an old injury. There doesn't look like there's any fresh blood or anything like that. But she's also definitely been in the wars. Now, I would say it's most likely that at least the 3 young males are her sub-adults, so they were her cubs at some point, and she fled, leading them away from the Matimbas, and probably fought very bravely in the defense of that one male. Her neck is looking a little bit scruffy, but other than that she seems to be fine. I'd say she's probably in the best condition of the group of them. Sandy raised a very interesting question. We were talking about Sarah's question about whether or not, why it is that the Tsalalas have stayed in this area, and I was chatting about the fact that they really don't have places to run to. But Sandy raises an interesting point as to who the father of the young males might be, and honestly, Sandy, I'm not too sure. I originally thought it was the Majingalani males, in which case this pride could be safe within their territory, but I'm not too sure exactly if that is the case, or if the Matimbas have pushed the Majingilans out completely to the point that they've moved their territory off into the west. Because we don't get to that area too much, I'm not too sure about that. I think it is the Majingalani males, but I could stand corrected on that. As for why they don't head across and try and find some safety with them, it's actually very similar to what happened with the Sticks and the Nkuhumas. They didn't try and accompany the males when the males moved. They stayed in the areas that are familiar to them, or at least they stayed at the outskirts of areas that are familiar to them. So the Sticks didn't go with the Matimbas, the Nkuhumas didn't go with the Matimbas. It's not the way that lions formulate or how they do work their lives. When there is a pride takeover, they don't follow males. They stay in the territories that they're in. And I suppose that makes sense because pride takeovers happen for a reason. They happen to prevent inbreeding, and so that the genetic line within the female stays fresh. So I would say that they're designed not to follow the males to new territories. When I have a moment, I will reposition, but for now we can just enjoy the journey of these lazy lions, or at the very least, maybe not lazy, Shab. I definitely can't call this lot lazy. I'd say exhausted and haunted might be a better description. But Cecilia, you were wondering, when it gets a little bit later, will they stand up and start roaring, or do they know to be quiet? And the answer is they definitely know to be quiet. I must say, since this pride takeover began, I actually don't think, and I'm not sure if the other presenters feel this way as well, but I feel like I haven't heard a lioness roar in months. And that's because I think they're all trying to fly under the radar and away from the males at the moment and not draw any attention to themselves. And it's only really once the things have settled down and are really safe and established once again, and that again could take months. We could find that the Birminghams are usurped by another set of males that we didn't even realize were on their way. But they won't be roaring until they feel settled and safe. Bearing in mind, of course, that right now, and they have had an encounter already, right now they are very much trespassing on Nkuhuma Pride Territory land. So they don't want to attract the attention of the Nkuhumas really either. They've already apparently had one encounter with them. So no, Cecilia, they won't be talking tonight. They won't be shouting. The Birmingham boys might be, but that again depends on whether or not they decide it's time to go out and hunt those buffalo. The Birminghams were calling last night. I did hear them before I went to bed. So they're still being very vocal. But this group is not going to. I'm going to shift around so we get a change of scene. But before I do, one last thing. Chatting about how this young male, and he's been attached to a piece of knobthorn the entire time I've been here, and I've watched him roll over. It's been hooked in his tail, it's been hooked in his legs. You can have a look and see how vicious those thorns are. At one point it was hooked between his leg and his tail and stretching the skin on both sides, and yet he absolutely cannot be bothered to get up and move. So, you know, they're tough creatures, very resilient things. Lisa, you're right, they do look hungry though. So I was hoping that buffalo herd actually might come their way. They really look like they could use a good meal. Definitely looking thin. And when that one young male stood up, it was clear that there was a bit of that flap that shows when their stomachs pull in on a really hungry lion. I'm going to shift around just so we can have a look at that animal, and I can show you that it isn't the male with the wound on his hip. And after that, we've clearly established which one it might be. Let's go round, loop back to the area that I was in. I mentioned that the Matimba males have moved into Londolozi, and the Birminghams have come in from the farm Birmingham. So we have a question that's very interesting from Through My Eyes Photography, which is the Twitter handle of the person concerned. You wanted to know, let's try and navigate this a little bit. You want to know how far a lion will go to establish a territory, so how far away they will move. To give you a rough idea, the Birmingham boys that you were watching with Scott are from a piece of land known as Birmingham. It's a farm called Birmingham. And I would say that is in a straight line, it's about 20 to 30 kilometers from where we are now and where they've established their territory. So the answer to that is, how far will they go? The answer is far. That was easily 20 to 30 kilometers. Could even be further if they find themselves not able to. Let's say the Birmingham boys had met with a Matimba resistance of 5 males rather than 2. Then they would have gone even further towards Londolozi and Mala Mala, and at the moment they're even pushing into those areas. So up to 40 kilometers from where they originally came from. Females, on the other hand, will stick pretty much to where they know, unless it's a situation like we have here. And here's our young male that I wanted to just have a look at. He's also, if we have a look at his back, he's also got an injury there, and that is fresher than the one we were looking at on the other male. Pretty much in the same place as well. It seems to be the target area that male lions go for. It is quite often that we hear about male lions having their backs broken in fights with other males, and that's because they go for that area. You can imagine if they get them from that angle behind, it's away from the worst of the teeth and the claws that the animal can use to defend itself. And definitely no injury on that hip. So this is not, the missing male is definitely the one with the serious limp. Oh, gorgeous girl. She's definitely not a young lioness. Her nose is completely black. Her teeth are fairly yellowed and damaged when she does yawn or does show them. And we're looking at her, and I've mentioned that she's run away to keep her sub-adult sons safe, and that she will continue to stay away, or possibly continue to stay away, until her sub-adult sons are safe. And Djuma has asked the very salient question from that point is, how long can this lioness be away from her natal pride before returning? Because if she's got at least another year until these young males are independent of her, will they still accept her when she tries to return? Well, she's fortunate enough that if they don't, and I do think that generally this is the kind of scenario that results in a pride split. So quite often the lioness is away for too long. She doesn't get accepted in the same way. She might be tolerated, but not accepted completely back into the pride. But at least she does have this young female to form her own pride with. So the females will stick together once the young males leave, probably breed and reproduce. They could even start their own Tsalala sort of breakaway pride. And that's why we end up with these confused situations where we've got one breakaway and another breakaway. And sometimes the breakaways are bigger than the original pride. Over years it starts to level itself out. But Djuma, I think there is a chance that she won't be accepted back into her natal group, though she might move in the same area. Quite similar to what we have with the sticks. The sticks young to adult lionesses, the ones that had the cubs right when I started working here, they were always together, and then there were some older sticks females who were pretty much always separate from them. And I think a similar situation could happen here. hopefully she will have some company. I don't think that these lions are going to be up to too much, but so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to leave them for now and then return to them as it starts to get a bit dark and a bit cooler. I want to go and see if there's any sign of that buffalo herd, if they're around this area, and if they show any signs of heading towards these lions, hoping they might provide them with a good meal. Either way, I'm going to be returning to find out what they do tonight. They are very hungry. There's a very good chance they're going to come and hunt. Shame. Alright, so Jenny, Connie, Liz, Susan and Deb, and lots of the viewers, thank you for letting us know that there's a huge herd at Arathusa right now. I might be paying them a visit. I think it might be time. And I'll be back with these lions in a bit. I'm happy to see the Tsalalas in a way, but I would prefer to have seen them all reunited. Now, if the buffalo herd is at Arathusa, that does by no means mean that they couldn't make it here towards the end of the evening. It just depends on which direction they decide to go. We're probably about 4 or 5 kilometers away from the Arathusa Dam, and the wind is gently blowing in this direction, so they might walk up into the wind towards us. Let's go see what we can find. Injuries on the young male, and we have a question from Deonta from Long Beach. Please let me know if I'm getting your name right, because I don't think we've had a question, or I certainly haven't had a question from you before. So Deonta, you want to know, do I think that the way that they attack around the back lower spine, is that a way of inflicting injury or spinal injury on their victim? And the answer is yes, I do. When lions attack other lions, I think it's the best method of approach. As soon as they manage to get hold of that spine and break it, the fight is instantly won. And attacking from behind, of course, means that that other lion can't necessarily turn around and bite or fight back with its front paws or its teeth. And we've seen it happen with the way that lions kill their prey as well. I'm sure many of you have seen images of hunts, and I know that one drive that Brent did where we saw the kill from start to finish. One of the first things the lioness does, or sometimes male does, is to jump onto the back of the animal that they're trying to kill, especially if it's a big animal like a buffalo, and try and inflict injuries from that side, because you're safe from the heads and the horns. The other area that lions generally go for, and it's nice to see at least for these 2 remaining young males, they've escaped that, is they quite often go for the groin. Particularly soft and vulnerable patch on a lion, and very difficult for them to defend if an injury is inflicted there. And of course there's lots of vital blood vessels. I think that the reports that came in...
What crash cuts? Well, I was just telling Jerry, who's not mic'd up or doesn't have comms, that we need to stand by for a crash cut. So welcome back. And we were just discussing the lion dynamics and buffalo hunting, and it's great to have Jerry on the team, and always wonderful to get to know some more people as the Safari Live crew continues growing. And we're expecting 35 people to be in camp over the Big Cat Week coming up, which is exciting stuff. The last one there were only 25 people, but still increasing drastically in numbers, which makes for exciting stuff and a little bit more stimulation out in these remote places. This is the same Inyala we saw earlier in Philemon's Dip, which is just down to our right. And this road that we're taking now is called Ingwe Alley, which was pioneered by the cameraman Wiem and myself a few months back. And it's kind of stuck, stood, carried on, stuck. Anyway, you know what I mean? It's now a more official road. And very happy memories of finding a young male leopard called Kunyuma on the Twin Dam side of Ingwe Alley. It's on the western side of this road. And it was actually the same day that we had cleared a pathway. There was no way to get from Philemon's Dip all the way to Twin Dams Road because there was too many fallen down trees and obstructions. But we found a few areas where we could clear pathways, and now you could go all the way through. And after checking it about 3 or 4 times that drive, we knew he was somewhere in this area but couldn't work out exactly where. It was about 10 minutes left of the safari, and VM suggested that we do one last turn down Ingwe Alley, and it was at that time that we approached. We were driving in a westerly direction towards the setting sun, and we saw his body silhouetted up in a marula tree. He was busy feeding on a duiker. Now it's not hugely likely that we'll bump into him this afternoon. He's moved off now, him and his brother quarantine, but this time last year they were the most viewed leopard here at Djuma, the two brothers. They seem to have moved further south from here and are in good health, but sadly we don't see them as much as we used to. Hello Chris in Arizona, and thanks for sending your question through to us. Chris is interested to know a little bit more about lions roaring and their vocalizations and what exactly they may mean and when they may use the different vocalizations. I like the way you're thinking, Chris. Hopefully the Birmingham males will roar for us tonight, but there's no guarantees that they will. Now, different vocalizations that lions will make will be the deep, regular roar of a lion, which is the noise that I was just making there as this Inyala runs off, terrified for its life after hearing "Stop the Lion." So, as I was saying, the regular communication of lion is a deep rumbling "ooh," which can be heard from about 5 miles away by the human ear on a still night. So it's very loud, and it's used to communicate with other males, other females, general communication, possibly even coalition members that are within the same coalition but that have just split up. So the regular lion's roar is communication. But then there will be growling, and that same roar used during battles, during high intensity moments. So I guess, one way of putting it is just the same as us as humans. We can speak to one another peacefully, lovingly, and we can also, using the same mode of communication, shout at one another in a fight or in times of hardship or times of passion. So the same audio can be used and interchanged in different scenarios, but it will mean different things depending on how that audio is pronounced. I don't know if that's making much sense, but all noises that animals make are quite simple. Us and monkeys and birds are to communicate with their own species, with other species. There's softer calls that lions will also let out, contact calls. Ooh, ooh, almost like a cough. But it's all for communication with one another. It's certainly not going to be to aid in catching prey. It's just going to alert prey that they're in the area. Good afternoon to Gilly in Milwaukee, and happy to have you on safari with us. Gilly's interested in knowing how will those 5 Birmingham males determine who will be the lucky individual who gets to mate with a lioness who may fall in season, and they will fight amongst one another for those rights, just as they will fight amongst one another for the best spot on a carcass when feeding. It won't necessarily be every time a lady pops onto this scene, and you again can kind of equate this to humans. You may get a person who is doing well with the ladies, but only for a period of time until his younger brother also grows and develops and then begins to challenge him. But you'll probably find that an older brother will assert his dominance early on and ride that wave for a couple of months or years until the younger brother thinks, no, hang on, I think it's worth a rematch here to establish exactly who's boss. And every so often these lions will have altercations with one another when they are driven by hormones and testosterone and the scent of a female in estrus. So they certainly will be fighting. It's not going to be a democratic vote of whose turn it is, or this one hasn't had a chance for so long. Size and strength matters in nature, which is not the case with us as humans, unless you're a UFL football player, of course, then it could be useful, but most of the time it's brain power that gets us as humans into high positions. It's the opposite in nature. It's brawn, it's strength. So don't think of it as a democratic vote. That would not be the case. It's always going to be a fight to get those rights. The tree up to our left is a marula tree that harbors happy memories of where Djuma was standing with his Ndika kill. It was just up on this branch over here, where he was busy snacking on his Ndika when we found him, and he was there even until the following morning. And some of you may remember a herd of elephants coming onto the scene and chasing him off, which was quite exciting. It's cooling down into a wonderful, wonderful evening. Strong breeze, and as the sun dips lower and lower, it becomes more pleasantly cool. There are also some clouds off to the western horizon, which are already helping diffuse the bright sunshine's warmth on us. Oh, sorry, Liam. Little bump on our road there. We need to get our road maintenance team out.
Right there.
I think we should do at least one more large loop before getting back to the Birmingham boys. And by covering as much ground as possible in the surrounding area, we at least have an idea if there's any prey around or if there's any other predators lurking about. It'd be wonderful to see a leopard again. I haven't seen one since I've been back from leave. Two viewers who are hoping for a sighting of some cheetah. Susan and Wolfgang from Sweden are both hoping to see cheetah. There were 2 male cheetahs seen on Torchwood this morning, which is the property to the east of us, but it was quite far east and they were heading straight south, not towards our property. That's not to say that they aren't here somewhere right now, and hopefully they will pop up and could pop up at any moment. But I would be lying if I said I felt confident that we would see them this afternoon. But who knows, maybe in the coming days they will venture back onto Djuma. In the whole year that I've been here, I've probably had, well, I have had 3 cheetah sightings in 1 year. So that gives you an idea of the frequency that we get to see them. It's not often at all. And I was chatting about it this morning for a number of reasons. The density of predators or of other predators and more apex predators, lion, leopard and even hyena, are just too high here for cheetah to do well. The thick bush obviously doesn't help that fact, because it means that all these apex predators can... Here's a cuckoo. It's the first one I'm going to be able to show. Oh, it flew off, but Vims was very quick to the draw. They're generally not the most welcoming of birds, the cuckoos. Let's see if we can get a bit closer. There's a starling squawking up near us, and these cuckoos will... Oh, there it is there. Have you got it there, VM? Just go straight in. And on that little dead branch, nice. So, this looks to me like a Levaliance cuckoo. Yeah, it's a Levaliance. It was formerly known as a striped cuckoo, and as all cuckoos, it parasitizes other birds' nests. So it will go in, and while the hosts are away, it will lay its eggs, or at least one egg, within its nest. And cuckoo's eggs are very clever. They've got a short detonation period, so they'll hatch often very soon after being laid, and therefore will be the first chick to be fed by its foster parents, who in the case of this cuckoo will be the arrow-marked babbler. I think they parasitize strictly the arrow-marked babbler in this area. But what I'm going to do is just grab my book out and double check. I've got a bit rusty with my cuckoos, and I also just want to show you the other members of the cuckoo family that we will be able to see in the coming weeks. So top right, Levaliance cuckoo quite clearly has the striped underparts, so that's who we saw now. And I've just read quickly here, hosting only on babblers, making arrow-marked babbler its target in the park. We will also see the Jacobin cuckoo in this area, which is the one that's most easily confused with the Levaliance, but they are darker in coloration. But there's 2 different morphs. There's the pied morph and the black morph. The pied morph is difficult because in flight it's difficult to see whether it has stripes or not. Then Jamie's already seen a few great spotted cuckoos. The one below, the red-chested cuckoo, I heard yesterday when at Arathusa. Thick-billed cuckoo I haven't seen very many of here. but we might get lucky there. And I'm just going to flip over the page quickly, as there are many cuckoos about. The black cuckoo's been very vocal, and we may even hear it when we get back to the lions a bit later. I'm so sad is how its call rings out. Then the common and African cuckoo are another two that are difficult to distinguish. They look identical, so top right and bottom left, you can see at a glance, look to be the same bird, but there are very slight differences. And then the classes and the Deirdricks are probably the most pretty and colourful of the cuckoos, with bright emerald green that glistens in the sunshine. However, they do cause hardship for many other birds, as clever as their nesting method is. Because their chicks are very often bigger than their host species, they will completely outcompete their host species chicks, and you'll find the foster parents end up raising a chick that doesn't even belong to their family and not raising one of their own offspring. So interesting stuff, but pretty hardcore to see, and maybe we'll even get to see an adult of a foster parent feeding an often much larger chick who is the hatchling of one of the cuckoos. So that's something to look forward to. Very happy to hear that Gaba has got a new bird for her bird list. And if you are joining for the first time, I'd strongly suggest you get a pen and paper, or even start a list on your phone or iPad or whatever you're using, and start documenting all the different birds you see out here. It's a great way to keep track of things, and naturally you're going to want to keep adding more birds to your list, and by wanting to add more birds to your list, you'll put more pressure on us to find you more birds, and then everyone's winning. So